Welcome to the NFL Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. The NFL Show is brought to you by Replenishing Care and Technologies. Make sure you check them out at rcandt.com. I am your co-host for the NFL Show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in NFL beat writer and co-host Sam Teets. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing great, Mike. How are you?
All right. We have a special guest today. He's the one that thought Kirk Cousins was one of the top 6 quarterbacks in the NFL. Help me welcome to the show, Sam. I need to drink more water, McGinnis. How you doing, Sam?
Yep. Take care of your body, people, because if you don't, it doesn't work.
All right, guys. So today we're going to preview the AFC West, which, of course, the favorite going in has to be the Kansas City Chiefs. And the thing about the Chiefs, when we look at this going in, Sam Teets, is the fact that even though there's no preseason games, camp's a little different. The great thing for them is, they've pretty much kept everybody together. And they're probably going to be able to hit the ground running as well as anybody, if not better than anybody.
Yeah, most of the players who are returning and are starting for them have been there a couple of years. The only real new addition that you have is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Most of the other guys are at the very least in their second years with the team. So you don't have a lot of moving around. You brought in a new guard at right guard to replace the guy who opted out. But other than that, it's the one guard, the one running back. Everyone else is returning. So they've got a full staff of Super Bowl players, and they're ready to go.
All right, so I would say when we look at the Kansas City Chiefs, the defense, maybe a little bit of a question, Sam, but outside of that, this team looks like – McGinnis, I'll ask you. When I look at them, I think the worst-case scenario would be complacency strikes.
I think they're going to do really well. I do think they're the next dynasty if you look at it. Even at last year, or pardon me, 2 years ago, one play was the difference between them going to the Super Bowl. So they could have done it even 2 years in a row. I'm not necessarily saying they're going to win the Super Bowl this year, but I do think they'll win at least 1 or 2 more over the coming years.
And you did have a point there, Mike, with the complacency. So I'd be worried that you're an awesome team. You've been told how amazing you are for months now, and you've been told about for the last 2 years that you're a great team and you have the best quarterback in football. So at some point, you have to worry that some guys might be thinking, oh, we're so great, we can't be touched, or we'll just kick into gear once we make the playoffs. That's not always how it works.
Well, I think that's the reason why we've not seen back-to-back Super Bowl winners since 2004 and 2005 with the New England Patriots. And Sam McGinnis, my question to you is, what is a dynasty? How many years consist for it to become a dynasty?
For me, I guess it would have to be at least 5 to 10 years, somewhere in there, with at least 2 to 3, maybe 3 or more in that time. Somewhere.
All right. Do you agree, Sam Teets?
I would say if we're talking 10 years, I would say 4 appearances and maybe 3 wins. I think that's roughly what you need to be considered a dynasty. I lean more towards the 4 area if you really want to be considered a dynastic team. We've seen what the Patriots done, and they've basically done it for 20-plus years at this point. But I would think 4 Super Bowls, 10 years is probably what you consider a dynasty level area.
Yeah, and you've still got a 62-year-old coach here, and I know this team is signed in together for the next couple of years, but what happens after that? Because they're paying so much money to 3 or 4 guys. So I don't know if we're looking at 10 years, but I also think this. If Mahomes is what he has been the first couple of years, it's going to be a lot easier to be a dynasty. Now, I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to ask Sam Teets this first. Sam, who is the biggest threat to the Kansas City Chiefs winning the division again?
Well, that to me would have to be the Denver Broncos just because of the players they've added. And they've avoided injuries. The Chargers had some great players early on. They've suffered some injuries, though, in the past couple of days. The Broncos have remained relatively healthy. And it's also the fact that Drew Lock is an unknown. We don't know how good or how bad Drew Lock can be. So that's really what it is to me. Because at this point, I know what the Raiders are. I have a relatively good idea what the Chargers are. I don't really know what the Broncos are yet. And that, to me, is the only option that could really threaten the Chiefs, other than injuries, of course.
Okay, Sam Teets or McGinnis?
Yeah, I feel like when it comes to the Broncos, they've got a high floor, or pardon me, a low floor, but also a high ceiling because we don't exactly know what they're going to be. So I would say they're probably the biggest threat, but it's only if they get to the higher ceiling of their potential.
So my question is on the Broncos, though, Teets, is the offensive line good enough?
Yeah, that would be the biggest question to me. And we've talked about back when we were throwing around ideas where Trent Williams would end up. We mentioned the Broncos because they've had troubles at left tackle. Garrett Bowles is a holding machine. He gets destroyed every year. So that's a problem. Dalton Reiser, he's a good left guard. They brought in a new center in the draft. They signed Graham Glasgow, and they got DeMar Dotson. So they've really replaced basically 4 pieces of this offensive line the past 2 years. Of course, the big issue is still the left tackle position because it's the same guy they've had problems with in the past. I think the offensive line is passable. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's going to be fantastic, but I think it's going to be good enough for the Broncos to go out and win 9 to 10 games.
I think 9 to 10 games is a huge stretch for Denver. I really do. I mean, there's no preseason games. You're depending on a lot of rookies. You're depending on a lot of moving parts on the offensive line that won't have played in a real game together until the first game. And you've got rookie wide receivers in Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler. We don't know how quickly they will be able to get into the mix also. And I still have a lot of questions about Drew Lock. I think Melvin Gordon was a great signing. You've already got Phillip Lindsay there. But I don't see this team really being a contender right away, McGinnis.
Yeah, I think I don't know when we're getting to the prediction on that team, but I was looking at them at maybe 8-8, 9-7, or pardon me, 7-9.
All right, and that brings us to a team defensively that looks really good. But Sam Teets, what's your take on the Los Angeles Chargers?
Well, I'm selling Los Angeles Chargers now after what happened. I think it was yesterday or the day before that when Derwin James goes down with an injury. He has season-ending meniscus surgery. So Derwin James, who in my mind is a top 20 player in the NFL, was going to be competing for the Defensive Player of the Year award this season. He's not going to be playing at all for the entire year. So to me, that just knocks them out. I know it seems kind of crazy to say losing one safety would just kill a team, but I think they're right there because they don't have a solid quarterback situation. Anthony Lynn just came out and said today, Tyrod Taylor is the starter. Tyrod Taylor to me is not a starting quarterback in the NFL, and Justin Herbert isn't either. So I don't view the Chargers as a competitive team in terms of going out there and winning the division.
Well, there's also probably 15 other starting quarterbacks in the NFL that aren't really starting quarterbacks because there's only so many real starting quarterbacks. What's your take on the Chargers, Sam McGinnis?
I think they'll actually do better than the Broncos. I don't see them as winning 11-plus games, but I do think Tyrod Taylor actually can get some things done. He may actually, with what Phillip Rivers had done in the fourth quarter so many times last year, I think he actually, sadly enough, may be an improvement. So I don't think they're like a high-end contender. I don't think they'll beat the Kansas City out for the division. I don't think anybody in the division will be doing that, but I do think they're number 2.
Okay,
so you're telling me you think Tyrod Taylor is going to be better than Drew Lock, and he's going to be better than what Phillip Rivers was last year?
Yes, I agree with Sam here. Go ahead, Sam. Tell him yes.
I think when it comes to it, I think as a whole, the team just might be better. You can't just look at one player. It doesn't work that way.
Well, I think this, Sam Teets, my response to that would be this. I would take Tyrod Taylor over Drew Lock any day. I've seen Tyrod Taylor actually play well in NFL games. Lock's a little shaky. He's only played 1 year. I would err on the side of Tyrod Taylor. With that being said, I think losing Derwin James is a killer for this season because you're basically taking the quarterback of that defense away. You lost Melvin Gordon. I know you got Austin Eckler, but you don't have the complement to him. And you've got Keenan Allen. But I think what's going to happen here is I think Tyrod Taylor will falter early, even though I think he's better than Drew Lock. And by falter early, I think it's going to kind of be like he was in Cleveland, where he's not playing terrible, but they've got so much invested in Justin Herbert that they're going to thrust him into action earlier than what they should. I think he will struggle. I think that'll hurt his long-term development. I think the Chargers are a 5-1 team.
Yeah, I think we're going to see Justin Herbert before or maybe around week 6 because that's just what you happen. You don't take a guy in the first round to not play him. I mean, there are very few teams that get away with that. I think the Chargers are going to lose games. They're going to lose games early, and it's going to get to the point where you're going to have to put your rookie quarterback in there just to see what he has because you're going to have so much pressure. And Anthony Lynn probably maybe he gets one more year after the season. But I think if you go and win only 4 or 5 games this year, you got to start feeling you're on the hot seat if you're Anthony Lynn.
Yeah, because this is his 3rd year. And I think he's a good football coach, but you got to have players too. You can be the greatest coach in the world, but if you don't have the players, it's not getting done. Let's go ahead. Let's look at the Las Vegas Raiders, which sounds stupid to say because it is stupid. But they have a collection of young talent, including first-round pick Henry Ruggs III from Alabama, second-year running back Josh Jacobs, 2019 breakout tight end Darren Waller, plus the continued maturation of Derek Carr. When I look at this team, I think there is some hope for the Raiders. I just don't know how much. And really when I look at this, I think to think that any of these teams can challenge the Kansas City Chiefs is absolutely ridiculous. Teets.
Yeah, no, I think it's crazy. I think it's crazy to think that any of these teams could actually go out there and beat the Chiefs. The only way I could see that happening is if Mahomes gets hurt again. I know we had last year; he missed 2 or 3 games. That's the only way I could see when these teams going out there and actually beating the Chiefs straight up. I had the lowest expectations for the Raiders out of every team in this division, partially because there are unknowns on the Chargers and there are unknowns on the Broncos that could turn into high-end players. I don't have those same expectations for the Raiders. And also, I have a little bit more faith in the coaching staff and the front offices for Denver and Los Angeles.
All right. McGinnis?
Yeah, again, there's high potential, but it goes both ways. So, yeah, I could see them going maybe 9-7, but at the same time, I could see them being very dysfunctional and still sputtering out in the season. So with that being the case and just not trusting that team and seeing some things that I saw today, I'm putting them at the lowest spot.
I wouldn't put him at the lowest spot because I believe this. I think with Derek Carr, they've got the second best quarterback in this division by far.
I think that's a fair statement.
I think the other thing is this. With rookie camps being canceled because of COVID, I think it turns out maybe 2020 was not the ideal year to have 5 picks in the first 3 rounds. I think they're going to struggle early. I think this is a team will get better as the season goes on, but I still don't see more than 7 wins for this team. I really don't see anybody in this division getting above 500 outside of the Chiefs, Sam Teets.
I'm going to disagree with you there. I think if we talk high end, I think the Broncos could honestly get 10 wins. I know that sounds a little bit ridiculous. I think they don't
have a quarterback, Sam. You got to have a quarterback.
Well, hey, and the Denver Broncos won the Super Bowl with Peyton Manning when Peyton Manning's basically walking around like in a boot the entire season.
Second.
So,
you're going to compare. Wait a second, though. That Denver Bronco defense was one of the greatest defenses in NFL history. That's why they won. And also, they played a Carolina Panthers team that had no O-line. Hell, Denver didn't have an O-line. They won that on defense in a down year in the NFL where if you look at the teams there, I think there was to put it like this, if the Denver Broncos would have had to beat the Kansas City Chiefs with Peyton Manning and that defense, I don't think they beat the Chiefs in that game. I think the NFL is a lot different now than what it was 5 years ago competitively. And I think to compare one of the greatest defenses of all time to what you got now, I think it's a little bit crazy.
I'm not saying it's necessarily apples to apples. I think this is definitely a downgrade. It's nowhere near close. You don't have a DeMarcus Ware. I love DeMarcus Ware. You don't have that kind of player on this team. But at the same point, I think this defense is good enough where they can go out there and they win a couple of games with this defense. I could see them getting to 9 wins. I could see them getting 8 wins. It's the other teams I'm not trusting.
You still got to score points. And I don't think this is an all-time great defense. And if you're not an all-time great defense, you got to be able to score some points.
I suppose. I just like the defensive personnel they have. I think they got really good defensive backs, especially at the safety level. And they've got Von Miller and Bradley Chubb coming back out front. I think that's a pretty good defense.
All right. So when we look at this defense, or when we look at this division, I assume all of us are going to pick the Chiefs to come in first.
Oh yeah.
Agreed?
We gotta.
All right.
We have to.
So I'm going to go with. If I had to finish this up, I would go Raiders, Broncos, Chargers, 2, 3, and 4. But none of them make the playoffs. Sam Teets?
Now I'll go Broncos, Chargers, Raiders, and I think the Broncos have a shot at a wild card spot.
They don't. You're going to pay for this all season too, because I'm going to keep
probably. Yeah, you're not going to forget this. So we got to see either I'm going to be right or I'm going to be wrong, and I'm going to be reminded I'm wrong every single week.
Well, how many times have you been able to remind me how wrong I was?
One day, Mike. All right, one day we're going to get there.
We've been doing it for like a year or two, and there still hasn't come up that one day where you were right and I was wrong.
It's inevitable, Mike. It'll happen someday.
It's maybe not through you, but it has already happened. I mean, he did say the Chiefs and Andy Reid, so.
I said the Chiefs and Andy Reid what?
I thought you said Andy Reid wasn't ever going to win a Super Bowl or something like that. Yeah.
I did say that.
I definitely said that.
And it took like 15 years to get it.
It happens to be very infrequent.
Hey, in my defense, though, to win it, he had to have Kyle Shanahan choke it to him.
Yeah, well, it's not the first time Kyle Shanahan's given away a Super Bowl ring to someone else.
Now, Tony Davis on Facebook says the NFL is dead. R.I.P. You guys agree or disagree?
Let's just disagree on that one.
Why do you disagree?
What's the NFL dying over? I mean, come on. People are just complaining about everything. People are so soft. People get insulted by everything. It's the NFL. It's football. And if you're not really a football fan, you weren't watching to begin with. You were just tuning in for 30 minutes, maybe on Sunday when you were bored and you were going off and doing something else. So to me, if you're a diehard football fan, if you've been watching your whole life, I think you're still watching the game. The NFL is in no danger at all.
All right. Sam McGinnis, do you agree?
I think the NFL will be fine. It's still sports, and just like people have boycotted it in the past, it's still running. Whether their numbers will be higher or lower, I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's still going to run. It's a major organization.
And let me put this out there. The NFL owners are not worried at all. Did you see how many record-setting contracts we've had signed this summer? We've had like 9 different record-setting
deals. I'm not worried about
deals.
it at all because they got that big TV contract. It doesn't matter how many people watch.
So why do they? They're not scared.
And I think Tony is wrong that the NFL is dead. But I do think if Tony was to say that the NFL is not as popular as what it once was, I think that's true now, Sam.
Now, if we're talking about,
I don't think that's just from this year. I think this has been progressive over the last decade.
Yeah, I think we're talking 2000s, around 2010ish. I think would probably be the peak, I guess you could say, in NFL popularity. I think we've seen a trend where there've been less people viewing it on TV a little bit over the past maybe 5 to 7 years, I would say. I don't know. That's just because people are like illegally streaming it. I don't know really what the reason for that is. I just think there's people.
Let me ask you this: with the, I think it's going to drop off just because there are no fans in the stands. In a lot of cases, I think that's going to hurt the game. Would have, and I really don't know this because I haven't really watched much of either. But what are the Major League Baseball TV ratings at? Are those up, down, or what?
No, they're down. Everything from the summer is pretty much not doing what they were anticipating it would do. They're all significantly lower than what were originally expected. I think, like you said,
with the playoffs.
The NBA is not as high as they expected either. I think, but we talked about this before. You said not having fans in the stands is affecting the environment and affecting you as a viewer.
Yeah. Does it affect you, Sam?
Not really. I mean, honestly, I love hearing the crowd noise. I love hearing the background noise. I think that's part of being a fan, but I think I can also watch the games without that.
Well, don't you also think, and I'll go to Sam McGinnis on this, though, with all the politics that are brought into it, it doesn't matter which way they bring politics into it. I think it's safe to say that sports has always been kind of a respite from life in itself. And when you got to be beat over the head with either side repeatedly while you just want to watch a game, I think that hurts the ratings.
I think it could. It depends, but I think that's a possibility.
Sam Teets, what do you think?
No, I think it does. I think you see people who are more casual fans who are used to tuning in for a little bit, but not maybe just for one game, maybe not for the entire day's worth of football. I think you'll see some of those people turned away a little bit by this, just because if you're not fully committed to watching a team no matter what, then I think you could be turned off by this significantly.
Well, I don't think it's so much if you're turned off by watching your team. But you might get people, like I can tell you myself, over the last 20 years, I've watched less and less NFL. I always watch my team, even though they suck, the Bengals. But I get turned off by everything, whether it's the NFL and the way they treat, players with CTE issues, the way they don't take care of them, the way they just don't take care of retired players in general. I mean, that's all a turnoff to me. And more of these guys that I talked to in the 60s and 70s about this, the less I really want to watch this stuff. And now we're going to take, victims of police violence and we're going to stick their names on there. But we're not, a policeman that gets killed by a rioter, we're not going to put that name on there. It seems one-sided. It seems like that everything here is a liberal agenda, basically sparked through ESPN and Disney and ABC.
Well, hold there, because Tyler Eifert is putting the name of the one former cop who passed away a couple of months ago when he was killed by rioters defending his store. Tyler Eifert's putting his name on the back of his helmet. I don't know how they're doing it with the stickers. I haven't seen it.
But this is the thing. This is what I want. I don't want anybody's name on the back of a helmet. This is my point. I don't care if it's a rioter. I don't care if it's a police. I don't want a name on a helmet. Unless somebody from that organization died, then you can stick a number on it or whatever. But I'm just telling you this, and I think a lot of people agree this. I don't care what side politically you're on. I don't care if it's for the side, if something I agree with or not. I don't want to see it in the game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And like you said, Greg agrees with you here. I think a lot of people would agree with you in general. Personally, I think it's easy enough for me to ignore a sticker on the back of a helmet. I personally don't. I don't think it's a big deal for me. It's not going to affect how I watch the game.
It's not a big deal from you because you go to college right now, right? You got a bunch of stupid liberal teachers, right? I mean, this is the thing. I really just don't want to see this. Either way, I just want to watch the football game. I don't care about politics because politics don't care about me. All right? In the end, everybody that's a politician could care less about me, you, Sam, Greg, or Tony who's watching. They don't care. This is just about making money. So right now, 5 years ago, they pandered to Trump people by getting mad about people taking a knee. 5 years later, they can make more money if they go the opposite direction, so they'll do it. The NFL is just a big corporation. It's going to do whatever they can do to make as much money as possible.
Well, that is true. We have, and we've known that for a while now. The NFL will try to cover up situations that can make it look bad. The NFL will try to go with the flow when it needs to. That's just how the NFL does it, and it comes off as very false, and we can see that.
And the thing is this, my team gets Joe Burrow. I don't even care that there's a game in 2 weeks. I mean, I'll watch it. But, I mean, McGinnis, are you excited about the start of the NFL? Because I didn't know it was 2 weeks away until a day ago when somebody put something on social media counting down the hours.
Is that September 15th? I don't know if I'm doing no.
I don't know. It's somewhere around there.
I don't even know what.
September 12th. See, exactly. This is my point. Nobody knows. Nobody cares.
Yeah, it's not significantly less, I think, on the attraction as it was maybe last year. It's just because there's no preseason. I feel like there's preseason. I would definitely have known everything, all the dates by. It's been a little bit quieter this summer.
Yeah, and I don't watch preseason games anymore. Heck, I remember in the 80s, I'd get excited for my team playing a preseason game. I don't care. I mean, I'm just so sick and tired of being sick and tired. I mean, it's all we're done is beat over the head with COVID. We're beat over the head with protesters. We're beat over the head with rioters. We're beat over the head with police officers. I'm tired of being beat over the head, McGinnis. How about you?
Well, yeah, and here's the thing. Speaking of that COVID thing, there's so many commercials about we're together. I heard this from my brother. It's just like, yes, we know it's hard. We're sick of hearing about it. We're done. I get it. Like, I know you don't need to remind me every 5 minutes of the day.
Yeah, and you're not a patriot if you don't wear a mask. But I feel like that you are a patriot if you don't wear a mask. I mean, I'm just not down with doing whatever I'm told just because somebody told me to. And I'm pretty sure that the majority of people that die are 60 and over. I mean, they've taken high school football away in many states. I know that I coach a couple younger guys that are like 12, play sixth grade football in Kentucky. They've canceled their season, but the seventh grade team's allowed to play. I mean, what's the difference? I mean, to me, this is just about controlling what we think. And that's what I'm tired of. And that's why I don't care about the NFL season. We're still going to talk about it. And when we do and everybody's listening, I'll still act like I care. But to me, most of the fun of watching this stuff was gone years ago. And it's just because we've been in a gradual decline as a civilization. I mean, I don't care anymore. It's getting stupid. And we got Greg Gorecki, who used to watch the Buffalo preseason games in the 70s just to see them lose. That's mean, Greg. Greg's a Cleveland Browns fan, so you got to take a grain of salt, whatever Greg says. I'm just kidding, Greg.
Yeah.
I'm a Bengals fan, so that's rough, too. And Sam McGinnis is a Lions fan. Sam Teets is like he's a Steelers fan, so he just watches old NFL film stuff.
Everything from the 70s, man. Everything from the 70s.
Yeah, everything's 70s or early 2000s, something like that. But I don't know how we got off in this tangent. Well, I think it was Tony Davis's fault with the NFL is dead. I don't think the NFL will ever be dead because people are always going to like watching people hit each other. But I think it will die when, pretty much all contact is removed from the sport, which they're headed towards anyways. Because I still think what we're going to see in 20 years is if you watch the Pro Bowl now and that pathetic disgrace of a football game, I think that's what you'll see as a regular season game 20 years from now.
Yeah. Well, the NFL will be its own undoing at some point. I'm sure the NFL will make, even potentially before that, the NFL will make some mistake trying to expand by putting teams overseas or something. Like the NFL will do something that will just end up.
I think they've already done that. I think they're already in process of destroying their product. And our only hope is Dwayne Rock Johnson can save us with the XFL. What? He was a professional wrestler. He knows how to get things done.
Yeah, I know, but
he's got muscles all over the place. So at the end of the show, as you can see, Sam's drinking water. At the end of the show, him and Sam will each have to run 6 hills, and we're going to see if Sam can do it without passing out. It's an inside joke. It's Sam McGinnis, because he had to tap out of practice because even while the big heavy linemen were running up and down the hill,
drink
Sam
water.
was dehydrated.
It's not good when you don't. Throwing up because you didn't have enough water and you're constipated is not a good thing.
You're constipated. There's way too much information in that one sentence, Sam.
Dude, we asked you to run up hills. We didn't ask you about how was your bathroom.
I didn't. Next time I'm going to ask, does anybody have to go potty before we run up the hill? All right, guys. You can follow Sam Teets at Sam Teets 33. Sam McGinnis, where can people follow you?
Follow me at Samuel McG22 on Twitter and Instagram.
What division are we doing tomorrow, Sam McGinnis? Teets?
NFC West.
We got to change McGinnis's first name too legally. Go ahead, Sam Teets.
No, we can do NFC. We'll do NFC West. We'll cover Seattle and San Francisco's division.
Oh, you mean Arizona's division? All right. Sam McGinnis, do you want to join us tomorrow?
Sure, if I can, I'll check, but I would love to.
I mean, maybe we'll just hook you up to an IV during the show.
You're never going to live this down now, McGinnis.
The rest of your life, right?
What,
you'll have to hear about this the rest of your life.
There's always going to be something I'm hearing about. There's never not. There's always going to be something. It's last year, the block in the back. Yeah. So,
I don't even remember a block in the back. But all right, we're going to go ahead. We're going to wrap the show up. I want to remind everybody to check out our presenting sponsor, Replenishing Care and Technologies. Make sure you check them out at rcandt.com. So for now, for Sam McGinnis, Sam Teets, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been watching and listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.